infinite ammo.
Alright, we are live. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Renegade Operative, and today we are doing a podcast on the best and worst video game soundtracks. Obviously, I'm Renegade Operative, and I'd like to introduce you to my panel, which is the first guest here, Jojo.
Hello, how y'all doing? Thank you for having me on. I'm glad to be a part of this one, as I like video game soundtracks.
The next one is Daybreaker Rain.
How's it going, guys? I actually forgot this was happening today. So when I woke up to like 45 messages in Discord, I was like, oh.
Yep, it's always good to see those notifications just in case you sign up for something and you forget later.
Yeah, for sure.
Next up is Mr. Inferno Dragon.
What is up, people?
Next up is Andre.
What up, guys? Same as Rain. I legit forgot this was today. I thought it was like weeks later, but apparently it was like today. So yeah, but can't wait to talk about some soundtracks with you guys.
All right, so this is gonna be like just us spitballing about our favorite like OSTs. Licensed soundtracks, they really do count, so you can use like stuff from GTA or whatever. That's totally fine. I'm gonna skim through my list first, and then we're gonna discuss right after. So the first one that is like my favorite is the True Crime Streets of LA soundtrack. It's a lot of like West Coast flair to the soundtrack. It's really great if you're like relative to like a lot of either metal, hip hop, jazz, R&B. It just has a lot of flavor to it. It stands out after years of listening to it for so long. So whenever I boot this up on like Spotify or something, I think that's the best thing when you find like a soundtrack on Spotify and you really enjoyed it and it had a lot of licensed music. It really clicks with you. So I think they did a good job there. The next one that's like a really cool video game soundtrack is Streets of Rage 2. I just love the Go Straight theme. It's like synonymous with going out there and beating people's asses in the middle of the street, and I'm so glad that they decided to take the remix soundtrack and bring back the classic theme but rearranging it a little bit, making it a little bit different while also giving you the original OST. I like the RA3 soundtrack as well. I think that it's really great for what it does. I'm also talking about like the original for this one, not the remake, but the remake is also great as well with the recomposed soundtrack. Save theme, Free from Fear. Like Nemesis just stalking you as well, like the music where you have the tension, playing in the main menu. I thought that was also cool. Silent Hill 2 is a great soundtrack because it's just the end themes of the soundtracks that they have for the different endings you get really sounds like either melodic or very depressing, and it fits the tone of that game. And the last one for my favorite is Neo 1. Neo 1 had a lot of soundtracks that were obviously very war oriented, very inspired by like the feudal Japan world and everyone just clashing swords and fighting, so I really enjoyed that a lot. I think the thing that people will remember the most is when you die so many goddamn fucking times that you hear the theme play that's involving the death theme. And it constantly pops up and it's like, well, you just died, so you're going to be listening to this for like the next 5 hours. So that is like essentially my favorites. I'm going to hand it off to someone else, and then after we finish favorites for everyone else, I'm going to do negatives for like the bad soundtracks, and then we're going to just talk a little bit about random stuff and wrap up from there. Next up, we're going to just do Daybreaker, so you can discuss your favorites.
Alrighty. So I have a couple written down. First one being the Mystical Ninja starring Goemon soundtrack for the N64. It's probably one of the better soundtracks out there for the N64. I know a lot of people don't really care for some of the soundtracks that are on that system, but that one every track just really fits the area that you get to explore. And it's always been one of my favorites. And I actually found out a little bit of trivia that the actual physical soundtrack printing of it, like it's super rare and it's super expensive. A friend of mine actually, when he was in Japan, saw it for like I think 100,000 yen, and that's like ridiculous amount of money here in the US. So yeah, it's a super sought after physical soundtrack, but I've always loved it. My next soundtrack, this one was kind of hard to choose because I really like all the soundtracks from at least 1 through 6 is Mega Man X5. But I think Mega Man X5 for me stands out more out of all of the X game soundtracks. I do really like X4 soundtrack. I also like X6's soundtrack, even though that game's kind of not really that great for a lot of people as well. And that one, again, is just something that I could always go back and listen to. I always thought that the music really fit well, and they did justice to each of the levels. There was the right mix of music that is pumping, is really good to pump you up, like the bike level where you're on the bike at the beginning. That one's really good. So yeah, that's always been one that's stuck out to me. The next one I have written down, and I'm going to say this as a series because the majority of the soundtrack went over to the next game, is the Guilty Gear Xrd games. I've always been a fan of the Guilty Gear soundtracks, and I really, really love the Xrd stuff, especially all the vocal soundtracks that are out throughout the game. Probably my favorite one is it plays kind of close to the climax of the story in Xrd Sign, and it's called Storyteller, and I really like that track a lot. Staple of the game, and just seeing that so many people like that soundtrack too, that like a couple of people like Little V have done covers of some of the songs, so that's really cool. Another one from my childhood that I written down that's always stuck with me is the Panzer Dragoon soundtrack from the Sega Saturn. I've always really liked it because it's very orchestral, and I'm not normally a really big fan of that type of music, but I feel like, again, it was one of those soundtracks that just really fit. Like every track fit the area that you put. Every level had a very good track. So it's something I always listen to all the time. And then, of course, I also had Demon's Crest soundtrack, which is from the Super Nintendo. And that's my all-time favorite Super Nintendo game. Again, a very, very good soundtrack. It just absolutely nails the theme and the setting of the game. It has a very dark sort of dark, mysterious sort of sounds to it. It really feels like there's just like a very like dark haze over the world that you're exploring as you play, and it really fits the tone of the game. My next one that I have up is the Ikaruga soundtrack. Probably one of my favorite shoot 'em up titles. I know it's not super, like, it's renowned enough that it's gotten a bunch of ports and everything like that, but I know some people prefer other shoot 'em ups to it. But the soundtrack is really, really good. Again, it's one of those soundtracks that I feel that each track fits the stage that you play, and it just really gets you hyped. And the final one that I have is actually a recent one that I've really grown to like, is the Axiom Verge soundtrack. And that one really just captured the setting and the tone for what it was going for, and it really stuck with me. Like it was kind of mind-blowing because I didn't expect that, because a lot of the games that follow a specific format, in this case Axiom Verge, was very much inspired by the likes of Metroid. So for me, it was kind of like one of those things where it'd be really, really hard to replicate its sort of similar style soundtrack, but they managed to do it with Axiom Verge. So it's something I listen to all the time.
All right, so we're gonna move on to Infernal Dragon. List yours, good sir.
All right, thank you very much. So, in terms of some of my favorites, I'm gonna start right now with, gonna get out of the ball right now, Persona 5, and that definitely includes Royal as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure the internet has already spoken up enough about how P5 soundtrack is just amazing in every way possible, and I will agree. Just from the battle theme alone, you'd think Last Surprise, being a lyrical battle theme, would get annoying after a while, but I don't know what the hell they did over at Atlas, but they somehow managed to just make it work. And that's just one soundtrack, like part of the soundtrack. And the new one for Royal Takeover, I'm still not sick of it, and I put like hundreds of hours into this damn game alone. And themes of the palaces all fit well. I mean, even Palace 5, which we all know is terrible, but we all like it anyway because it still fits the motif. It's got a lot of style, and no matter what people say, it's also got substance as well. The themes are also great. Again, it really captures its own themes well, and I'd say that for all the Persona games. It's just that 5 in particular, I just really like the most out of all of them, which is a hard pick, I know, for some. But I do love me some P5 soundtrack. Another one is Okami, which, simple to say, it's all, like, this Japanese kind of instruments. And while I myself haven't fully finished it yet, I love what I'm hearing, though. Especially the battle theme. I actually used it once in a Smash meme. I do love some of that, like the serenity of like I forget the name of the fields and the creepiness of that ghost ship. Every place has some great ambiance with its soundtrack, and may the Spider Queen rot in hell. Oh, okay, this one was a toughie. So, Final Fantasy is a series we all know that has some highs and lows with its soundtrack, but to narrow it down to one, I'm just gonna say, for the moment anyway, 14. Final Fantasy 14. While a good chunk of its soundtrack is taking tracks from some of the more popular Final Fantasy games and remixing them, which is fine, but I like the remixes they use. It gives some better life into some older tracks. It revives older tracks and introduces them to a newer audience, even when it doesn't remix it, like for 6's boss theme when you're fighting Ultros. I was pleasantly surprised to hear that, and I love the hodgepodge of just all the love to some of the series' best. And I can't ever especially get enough of some of the final boss tracks. I'm not going to say the names of any of the bosses, just like I don't want to ruin anyone's experience with it, but I will say, especially the Dragon Song, one of the final boss scenes for the Heaven's Ward expansion. Then we have the final boss of the Stormblood expansion. I don't know the name of that track, but I don't care. I'll just say Royal Menagerie. And then, there's a theme to Shadowbringers, which is used in its final boss. I don't know how the hell they keep knocking it out of the park, especially with final boss tracks. And especially just, boss tracks in general. Even the mini boss tracks are catchy in some cases. It's like, Soken does some amazing freaking work, and you can't also forget Uematsu's work in 14, especially in the 1.0 side of things. We all know that game was crap, but at least the soundtrack was great. The town themes, the overworld themes, everything, every part of it gives you this grand sense of adventure, which I feel is great, especially for a big MMO like that, because especially if you're addicted, and I have plenty of friends that are, it's good to have, especially when you need that longevity with how the world is right now. I have my qualms with the game, sure, but I will never say anything bad about its soundtrack. It's some good shit. Holy wow. All right. Next up, I got down the first Sonic Adventure. I know some people will defend 2s a lot, and it's still good, but I prefer Adventure 1 for a different kind of reason. I like the variety in the music. Like, you don't just have a lot of rock and electric guitar, which is still good, don't get me wrong. But I love the variety of music. You have your rock, you have your jazz, you have your serene, you basically just have another big mix of different genres. Like, I can go into a stage like Emerald Coast and get 2 different feels at the same time. I can go into Casinopolis. It's like you have the lobby, then you have the pinball tables, and then you have that funky sewer track. Yeah, funky sewer track. I never thought since Ninja Turtles I'd say something like a funky sewer track, but anyone who's played the game knows that when you go down into the sewers in Casinopolis, it's some really funky crap, especially since it's the best way to get rings for that stage. So I especially can't get enough of it, and can't ever forget Open Your Heart. Crush 40 does some fantastic stuff, and I just wish that Sonic Team would get them back into the limelight already. I think they did with Team Sonic Racing, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, I really enjoyed like the Crush 40 soundtracks for Sonic Adventure, especially like the first one. I think that's when people really started getting like very, very interested in that band, and they kept on like pursuing more and more opening soundtracks with them. And even Shadow the Hedgehog, I mean, for all intents and purposes of what you may think of that game, it had a very good opening soundtrack that a lot of people will remember because, of course, it says I am, and it really sounds badass once you hear it in motion.
Not to mention 06, but that's still a whole other
Oh.
tangent.
I was good music.
Oh, yeah, it's like there are those moments where a game can be bad in terms of quality, but somehow you can still say like it has a kick-ass soundtrack. This is what I felt with Mega Man X6. It's a very bad game. It's a very awful freaking game, but the soundtrack is memorable. I can't take that away from it.
Yeah.
I do have one more. Between the three of them, it was so hard to choose in the series, but I'm still gonna give it to the first Xenoblade game. Like, between 1, X, and 2, all three of them have some really kick-ass soundtracks. But the first one it's immemorialized in the internet at this point for many reasons now, especially since the game finally picked up in popularity in the past several years. Hell, even getting that new Switch release later this month, and it has both day and night tracks, which you don't see very often in some games. I know it sounds like it should be a given, but it's surprisingly less common than I thought it would be. And every place fits so perfectly. I mean, I'll especially give a special mention to Gar Plain, which I think has become especially synonymous with Xenoblade and the character even Shulk in general, because when it's introduced, it has one of the best introductions I've ever seen in a video game. Like, it just is a large open field, all this like flora and fauna, and it hits you right in the face that it's like, oh yeah, it's gonna be a big one. And can't ever forget the battle music either, like the boss theme, the unique monster theme, and hell, the one use of Unfinished Battle, which was actually composed by Yoko Shimomura, who composed for Kingdom Hearts. Hopefully they use it more in the remake, but that's wishful thinking. But yeah, if I keep gushing about Xenoblade, I think we'll be here for another couple hours, and I don't want to do that. So all in all, I can't get enough of it at all. So there you go.
All right, so we're gonna give the mic to Jojo. Jojo, can you explain your favorites within the video game soundtrack verse?
Gladly. I'll start off with a classic of mine that's ironically a licensed soundtrack. This was part of my high school days when I had a Dreamcast and I got a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. And on that one, we had a lot of tracks that I liked back in those days, like Power Man 5000, When Worlds Collide, Papa Roach, kind of music of the time. But I enjoyed it, and put me in the mood to play the game, that's for sure. And a series I obviously cannot get over the soundtrack of is like what I think Daybreaker said, Guilty Gear X2, the Guilty Gear games, pretty much. And yeah, I agree with you there, Renegade. Power Man 5000 takes me back. And what was I? Dang it. Yeah, my other favorite soundtrack was the Dynasty Warriors music, obviously from all of those kinds of games where it's like, you're in a big battlefield and you just got this adrenaline rush going. You got the Dynasty Warriors soundtrack going. And I did say Guilty Gear there a second ago. I love the Guilty Gear soundtrack. Like back in college, I like burned a CD of like the songs from the game just to listen to while I'm doing my college homework. And I like good adrenaline rush music, which is why I like, Dynasty Warriors music and Guilty Gear, as well as the Dynasty Warriors spin-offs. But when it comes to like shooter style games, like my soundtrack is based on what I like is based on my mood. So like if I'm in like a really, high octane shooty experience, there's a game called Painkiller. It's on the PC and the original Xbox. You could buy it on Steam if you want to. It's really good. Like, it's got really, really good metal soundtrack. It's got no lyrics, but it definitely gives you that adrenaline rush that you love. And then there's the soundtracks I like for their atmosphere. And one of those is obviously the first 4 Silent Hill games. Those soundtracks nailed it like a hammer. Especially the ending soundtracks during the credits of Silent Hill 2. That's a really good song to listen to by itself. Same thing with Silent Hill 3 soundtrack, where they actually started introducing lyrics, and it was kind of cool that they even threw in the soundtrack on a CD if you bought the PS2 version back in the day. Another set of soundtracks I really like are from the Dragon Quest games, because listening to those while you're playing a big adventure game really, really fits the mood. Like, makes you feel like, yeah, you're on this big adventure, and you got these awesome orchestral soundtracks. I'm not even a big fan of orchestral soundtracks because you hear them in everything now, but the Dragon Quest ones were fantastic, especially in the latest release, DQ11. There were a lot of tearjerker moments in the music. I guess one more soundtrack that I really liked, which was another atmospheric one, was the Quake soundtrack done by good old Trent Reznor himself. It nailed the atmosphere, the dark, brooding atmosphere of the games, as well as the high impact, gunplay where you're running around, you're shooting monsters and shit, trying to stay alive. And that soundtrack was awesome too, especially in Quake 3 Arena, which is a really fun game. And soundtrack on that one's really fun to listen to. I used to have a CD of that to listen to while I did homework. Yeah, that's it. Those are my favorite soundtracks. I'm sure there's others on here, but I don't want to take up too much time.
It's cool, man. It's cool. The last one we have for favorites is Andre. So Andre, good sir, what is your favorite soundtracks?
Thanks. I'll gladly take this one. Okay, at the top of my head, let's see. Oh yeah, Jak and Daxter has really good music. The first Jak and Daxter, it's kind of more like it's kind of like a Crash Bandicoot feel to it if anyone's played the first game, because Jak 1 does have some similarities to it, but it's got really relaxing music, because like most of the game takes place on these islands, and like island most thing there's, and the music in that game is just really relaxing to listen to. I really enjoyed it because I grew up on the Jak games, and I definitely enjoyed like the OST a lot. Another game I can think of is, it's a series of games, but probably the Yakuza games. All the Yakuza games have really good music, so it's like really hard to figure out like what a favorite of mine is. But I really love Yakuza 0 soundtrack. Like, a lot of the battle themes are just awesome, because like Kiryu and Majima have their own like battle theme soon, and I just kind of love like doing karaoke and disco in the game. Like, all of those tracks are just amazing, like Bakamatai and Judgment and 24 Hours in a Row. Like, I can't get enough of those tracks. They're definitely great. Another game is, I know a lot of people don't have like really mixed feelings on this game, but Final Fantasy 13 had a really good OST to it. Like,
Whoa. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you. I can't hear Andre.
Yeah, the Andre just died. That was kind of weird.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's not good. Someone in chat. Let me tell him that if he's talking, we can't hear him. Can't hear you.
The Yakuza, that's a good one too. Love that.
Yeah, I can't say that, like, it's, if it comes to like honorable mentions, there is quite a lot of them. I think one of them that comes to mind for me is like, especially fighting games like Street Fighter, Third Strike, and Tekken, because Tekken 3 has like a fucking boatload of favorite music that I like. I like
Tekken 3.
Paul's theme, Jin's theme. Just you cannot just say that you don't love it if you're amped into the moment when you go against an opponent. I mean, it's very fucking good.
Man, I played the fuck out of Tekken 3 back in that era. Holy crap.
I like how you mentioned Tekken, because one song that stands out to me in Tekken is in Tekken 6. I'm sure you guys remember the sheep stage. Oh, there goes Andre.
Yole, yole.
That was such a catchy song.
Yeah, can't hear me.
Yeah,
we
can
can hear you
now.
Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. I guess maybe I should get a mic.
It's cool. We can hear you now, but we had to try to fill in the dead air. So can you continue from there?
Yeah. Okay, I'll go by quickly. But all right. Go by quickly. Yakuza Zero's OST is great. Jack 1 has great music. Devil May Cry 3 is really good. I love the Doom OSTs, and what was another? Final Fantasy 13. I believe that's it. Yeah. I think that's it.
Okay, those are all your picks. Okay, so for the worst soundtracks, and I'm noticing a pattern here with my list. For the worst soundtracks, I'm going to turn that into a more general discussion, because I seem to notice here that the problem with the worst soundtracks is that they tend to be remixes of songs that got butchered in later releases, or later sort of like renditions going from arcade to consoles, and the music gets like all butchered and messed up from there. And I know you guys probably have like a few examples of that, especially you, Daybreaker, because there are those songs where it's like it goes from arcade to console and it sounds like a little bit off.
Oh.
Yeah, I figured I'd ask you on that one.
It's funny he mentions that. I think that like 3 of them on my document are that. I know one definitely for sure.
Yeah, but I want you to go first, Daybreaker, on this one.
It was kind of funny. I forgot to like put any worst soundtracks down in my document. I should have been thinking about it as you guys were talking about it. But since you mentioned that, Ren, that is definitely something I will say that with games like the one that comes to mind, I think, is the Raiden games. The arcade soundtrack is really, really, really good. But then the ports of Raiden 1 to Super Nintendo and Genesis just don't have the same sort of appeal that the arcade game certainly did. Not that they were overly like horrible, but it was definitely like, this doesn't sound the same way. These tracks are kind of iconic, so it should, have done a little bit better. And even on Super Nintendo, it doesn't sound much better than the Genesis, which is a rarity, because usually the Super Nintendo has really, really good music when done right. Thinking on it, like, yeah, it's really hard to say. Like, I typically, at least with a lot of the games that I've played, I don't really ever like instinctively think like, oh, this is just, the soundtrack's awful. Like, I know that there was probably like a couple of the later Tony Hawk games that just didn't have the same kind of appeal as some of the earlier ones did with the genres of music that they put out. I didn't really care, this might be kind of weird, but like, I didn't really care for GTA 5's soundtrack. I know that it's like spread out through various radio stations when you're driving around and such, but it wasn't anything like, aside from like the 70s and 80s stuff I grew up with, like there wasn't really anything on that soundtrack that stood out to me. But yeah, this one's kind of tough for me. Like, it's just not something that I really ever actively think about, or I can really say like, yeah, that soundtrack just like, freaking made me want to stab my ears with a freaking screwdriver. I
think an easy target, Because I do agree with the Grand Theft Auto notion, like when it comes to licensed songs there, I feel like the lineup there wasn't as strong. Maybe it's because they tried to do the whole modern music thing, and I'm kind of like, well, my tastes are kind of not rooted in modern music. I like going back in the past and listening to stuff from the 80s, or maybe some sort of like powerhouse music that's like new metal that was done in like the early 2000s. So I really didn't enjoy the soundtrack of GTA 5 that much either. I think my favorites are like stuff you would see in San Andreas or Vice City, because they had a lot more licensed themes that really stood out to me that you could listen to on the radio from there. Like they had stuff from Kiss, they had stuff from Dawkins, which I also appreciated as well. It's just a lot of stuff that you would like maybe put on the radio and you would notice like instantly if you were born in that era. So I really enjoyed it then. But the problem for bad soundtracks is that I think an easy target would be for me the Resident Evil director's cut soundtrack for the DualShock version, where oh god,
the Looney Tunes music, guys, remember? The Looney Tunes.
I heard so much stuff went wrong with this. Apparently, the composer was like a fraud or something. Like he faked being
being deaf.
Wasn't
and
he
he had
a
a ghostwriter.
He had a
Yeah, he was a
ghostwriter,
ghostwriter.
and then I think he did music for Onimusha.
Actually, yeah, I was about to get to that. He did work on the original OC for Onimusha, and I guess when that happened, they had to re-record the music completely because that guy got booted out of the company years ago. So that's what happened.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. You don't want to give him like residuals or anything like that.
Oh yeah.
So anyone else have like any worse soundtracks or just a piece of music that stood out in your head and it's like,
Sonic Chronicles.
Probably, yeah.
Okay,
Chronicles, The Dark Brotherhood. I don't know how the hell a franchise like Sonic the freaking Hedgehog, who has had games of middling to crap quality in more times than I can count during the mid 2000s and late 2000s in some cases. But all the things those games shared was that while the games were either meh or god awful, the OSTs were at least good to make up for something. I mean, again, we brought up 06 earlier. I mean, we all know that game is infamous for many reasons, but the OST is the best part about it, no questions asked. But then there's Sonic Chronicles, which you do have like, I think you have like one or two like remixes there, but the problem is that everything sounds, how do I even describe it? It's all just terrible MIDI files. It's all just bad MIDI files. That's what it is. It's all just bad MIDI files. In fact, I've heard rumors, and I'm not sure if it's the true answer, but I've heard rumors that all that stuff in Chronicles, a part of the reason why it's so bad is because we were given a beta build of the game because during because during development, BioWare got bought out by EA, and they were all shifted. They were all shifted to Dragon Age after that. And then what we were given was a beta with placeholder music and placeholder sound effects. But just hearing all that kind of makes the ears bleed. And also, you want to talk about bad transitions? The Sega 32X release of Doom got hit nuts.
Just about to get to that because you reminded me of it.
I was gonna say that one actually.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that thought that, because you go to the Super Nintendo and you hear Doom and you just hear.
God damn.
It's amazing how much better the music sounds on the GBA port. Like
the GBA port, even
GBA. Oh man.
And then there's 32X, which is just
It's like they farted on a snare drum and called it a song.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just the absolute problem with the Genesis. Is just the sound chip was so different, and just there was not enough people that knew how to compose for that system very well. There are some that are really good, like
Sonic Team.
I know Sonic Team, yeah, exactly. But yeah, just there's just so much garbage on the Genesis when it comes to soundtracks.
Oh my! Wait, Genesis garbage? Did you mean Crazy Bus?
Oh boy, the Crazy Bus.
I know it's really can't much be considered much of a game, but you can't bring it. You can't just bring up terrible game soundtracks and not bring up Crazy Bus. Because you want to talk about bleeding out of your ears, just boot up just the title screen, raise the volume, and hope to hell you don't go deaf in the next 2.5 seconds.
Damn, that must suck.
Yeah, I think that's a testament to how bad some soundtracks can be, like where they didn't give a shit. Obviously, they decided to make the waveform like huge to the point where it blows out your ears, or it's like a big annoying noise. I just think that when it sounds like garbage like that, I just can't stand it. And even for like some of my favorite video games that have like composed music that's really good, like Silent Hill 1, there's other tracks where I get that they were trying to create a very scary, tense atmosphere, but there's some music that sounds like a guy is just beating on like a wooden table for like almost a few seconds. It doesn't sound appealing, but I get what they were trying to go for with that style of music.
Yeah.
Oh wait,
Definitely.
so it's like Mega Man 2, where you have the second half of Wily's Castle, which is not as good as the first half.
Yeah, I guess you could say something like that. So, did anyone else have anything for worst soundtracks?
I have one.
Go ahead, Andre. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. You know what? Probably I know since JoJo's a huge Silent Hill fan, and so am I. Probably Silent Hill Homecoming's OST. The soundtrack was just. Why did you get Corn of all people? Really? Corn?
That was Downpour.
That was Downpour.
Oh,
Yeah.
Downpour. Yeah, it's Downpour. Why would you get Corn for Downpour, man? No Akira Yamaoka.
Yeah, that one is weird because they replaced Akira with I think his name is Daniel Litch or something like that. He did like a TV show.
Dexter. He did
Dexter. Yeah.
Yeah, it just wasn't the same. Like, I think that's also like something that can be noted. Like when you can tell that a composer has been replaced and it doesn't really feel right when you go to the next entry. It's just weird when that happens. But continue on, Andre.
Yeah, but oh sure. Another OC I don't like too much is probably the Ratchet and Clank remake, but that's mostly just how bland it is. The music in that game is just very. It's just really it's very forgettable because the first game had pretty good music. Like I do remember a lot of the themes and how they went because it had this like techno vibe to it, but the remake is just very generic, like movie music. You know, like you hear in a Marvel movie or something like that. It wasn't that good, which actually brings me to another game, Sonic Boom. If that game even had music, to be honest, Sonic Boom's OST was just very. It was the same thing as Ratchet and Clank. It was just generic music.
No, it did. It did have music, but it was just there pretty much. It's not anything exciting because you got to remember that was not a Sonic team Sonic game, so they didn't really have any of the actual good composers working on anything.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's like a sad day when even Sonic Forces had like better music than that, because actually like Forces did have a more mediocre soundtrack just like Boom did, but it still had memorable stuff that you'd at least go back and be like, that was alright.
Yeah, I think Forces is pretty good music. Fist Bump is a mixed bag. I like it, but at the same time I don't know, it just didn't really click with me. That's about it, really, in terms of bad OCs. I can't really think of anything else. I know they played a lot of licensed games with really forgettable music, but that's kind of it, really.
All right, so next up is JoJo before we move on to the next topic.
All right. My first pick for really bad soundtrack, I would have to say, I don't know if you guys remember the Ultima games on the PC from like the 80s all the way up to like 99.
I've only ever played one of the NES Ultimas, so I never played the PC ones.
Right. Well, Ultima 9 it was a soundtrack that was more annoying than anything because all the songs sounded too alike, and they all had this stupid. It was just annoying. Like I can't like amongst all the other problems with the game, the soundtrack was just really, really irritating and generic. It sounded like rejected Winnie the Pooh music, for a lack of a better term. Another soundtrack I really did not like, though this is just on a personal taste, but Final Fight Streetwise. I mean, there were some songs on that soundtrack I enjoyed, but the rest of it was, I really didn't like it. It was mostly screamo metal and some like gangster rap, and that's just, it's not my thing. I mean, if you guys like it, that's cool, but it's not my pick. And I would have to say probably Wolfenstein: The New Colossus, especially with the end credits song. It takes a really, really, really bad version of Alice Cooper's "We're Not Gonna Take It" and butchers it by having some kids screaming it like they're Slipknot or something. It was just terrible. I'm gonna take it like that.
Oh man.
Oh my god.
One had good music, but two, it's like they dropped the ball on it at least.
Okay, so this goes into the next few questions. So, bad games with good soundtracks. Anyone have any picks for these? Like, it doesn't have to be too long. Just cite some examples.
I know we already said it.
Yeah,
I think me and
we all
We have to
said
get
it.
examples at this point. But,
Cheetah Man.
there's still more.
Cheetah Man. Is...
really.
Well, it makes like a good rave song, I guess, like for a techno rave or something.
Okay, I see a few, like I'm reading some threads and I see a few examples, like someone thought that like Terminator was pretty average, but the soundtrack for that was like absolutely amazing. It's an okay game, but it's not the greatest, but I did really like the soundtrack of that. I'm also trying to think of some other ones, but I don't know. Maybe we did cover all this, so I gotta think of something else.
I know I mentioned it earlier. Mega Man X6 has a really good soundtrack. Like, it really does. If anything, that game has, the soundtrack's really good. It's kind of it still is sort of a guilty pleasure game for me, so I don't necessarily think it's as horrible as some of the other games out there, but I will at least say, if anything, the soundtrack is really good. And I'll mention this because the game is not, it's definitely dated, but the game Evergrace for the PS2 was a very early launch title for the PS2. It was actually made by FromSoft.
From Software,
and you can actually kind of see shades of what became the Soul series in that game. Like, it almost kind of feels like a very, very early prototype of what eventually became the Souls games. But the soundtrack is not for everybody, but I think I like it so much because it's just so unique. It uses a very different composition, unlike anything I've ever played. It uses kind of more like chants and like, hymns sort of in its soundtrack. It sounds very, it's hard to say. It sounds very kind of like tribal in a way. Like, and it's really just very unique for that reason. So I definitely like it. Not every track is great, but there are some on that soundtrack that are really good. Even some of just the tracks with non-vocal elements are really good on that soundtrack. But the game is definitely questionable. Again, it's a guilty pleasure for me. I really enjoy the game a lot, but it's definitely one of those weird oddball soundtracks. But that is definitely something I would say give a listen to. It's kind of weird because in the game the original sound version of the soundtrack is different. Like, some of the tracks are kind of slightly arranged differently in the actual game, but when you listen to the soundtrack, they're different. So, but yeah, other than that, like, bad games with good soundtracks.
I'll give a mediocre game with a good soundtrack. You got Castlevania.
I got one actually.
Mediocre.
Probably Devil May Cry 2.
Oh, did you? I heard Castlevania 2, and I will agree with that.
Yeah, because I mean, anyone who's played knows it's nowhere near as good as 1 or 3 in terms of the classic Vania trilogy. But you hear like, sorry. All right, but you hear like what is it? Bloody Tears, the day theme.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. When you hear something like Bloody Tears, I mean, even if the game is average at best, like that's still a rockin' tune.
Yeah, and I mean it's been remixed and redone so many different times, like in various games and in various forms. Like there's one that sounds like it's straight out of a Toho game, which is super dope. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like that song became such a huge staple in the Castlevania series.
Or like another thing I actually surprised I didn't think of was like I know I keep bringing up Sonic, but Sonic 3D Blast, at least the Genesis version.
Oh god,
Like,
I remember that game.
Like, that game is pitifully average.
Yeah, it's terrible. I played it.
It's garbage. Not
But
good.
like, I mean, when you hear some of the Genesis tunes, they're really good, and it's like some of them, as many know, went off to actually become remixed in Sonic Adventure.
Hey,
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
that-
as much as that game is just, I mean, I wouldn't like be like, hey, I'm gonna play 3D Blast today. It's just, at least I can load up Green Grove Act 1 and be like, yep, this is good.
I would say here's my pick for bad game, good soundtrack. It's a game for the 3DO, and it was one of Naughty Dog's earliest games. It's called Way of the Warrior. It's a Mortal Kombat, style fighting game with digitized actors, but its gameplay is really god awful. Like everyone jumps like 20 feet in the air, and the gameplay is really hard. It's hard to do moves, but the soundtrack is all like freaking White Zombie, and it was like the one highlight of the game, other than the laughable graphics.
Isn't White Zombie like Rob Zombie's band or something?
Yeah, that was what Rob Zombie. Yeah, Rob Zombie was like the lead vocalist in that band. Then I think he went out on his own.
I think what they used to do in the past a lot is they used to use his track Dagala in a lot of racing games. I just remember that. Like,
Yep.
it always used to happen in like PS1 games, especially like I think Twisted Metal as well. It used it like once.
Yeah,
It
Twisted
had
Metal
a-
4.
Yeah.
It had it in 3 and 4 actually had a Rob Zombie tracks. And 4 you can actually play as Rob Zombie, which is the one, which in my
yeah, that's
opinion is the
right.
main highlight of that game. Is you could play as Rob Zombie, and he drives a little car from the music video of Dracula, which is cool.
Yeah, he drives a hearse, doesn't he?
I think I don't know. It's not a hearse. It's like a buggy kind of car, like almost a Model T.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I remember.
Yeah,
it.
look up the music video on YouTube later. You'll see exactly what it is. I don't know what the make is, but yeah.
All right, so to move on to the next one, this one is like super easy. Like, does anyone have any like favorite composers that they could list off from name now, and cite some of the songs they did that like sort of clicked and resonated with you?
All right, I'll go first on this one if you guys are okay with that.
Go ahead.
Koichi Sugiyama from no, that's not his name. Koichi Sugiyama from the Dragon Quest series. He is the composer since the beginning, and he is very, very good at his job, making nice epic music that, some of it pulls at the harp strings, and his best examples of that are like in 8 and Dragon Quest 8, Dragon Quest 4. He's one of my favorite composers. And then obviously there's Akira Yamaoka from my Silent Hill games. I mean, what else do I need to say? The guy is a master of atmosphere and music. I don't really know any other. Well, I guess Nobuo Uematsu, I guess, did some good music, and I think he contributed to the Final Fantasy series up to like 12. I think like everything before 12 was him. and I think he did Chrono Trigger too, which was which was I can't believe he didn't mention that one in the earlier Chrono Trigger. Yeah, those are my favorite composers that I know of by name, anyway.
To help you with the Uematsu thing, he did music for 4 as well.
14. Okay, well, cool.
Hmm.
Who is next?
I mean, I'll go since I already kind of
Go ahead.
already
Sure.
like the minute you mentioned composers, I'm like I can already name.
Sure.
I mean, you already mentioned Uematsu, but I'll just say again, I love his work in the Final Fantasy series, like to death. I mean, like he got music from 4, 6, 7 especially. 7's some good shit. And he even did 7 remake. I saw in the credits, and I'm like, it explains a lot actually, because 7 remake has some bopping tunes as well. Another composer, actually, I mentioned him earlier, Masayoshi Soken, who is the composer for Final Fantasy 14. Like, he's like now the main composer as of late, like, because while Uematsu just does his thing nowadays. But Soken has, I mean, I know some people that could talk your ear off about Soken's music. It's like you listen to some of the tunes from 14, and you just, again, I mentioned how good that music is, so I think that should speak for itself. But especially like the main theme for Shadowbringers, I mean, just look it up and like it's holy shit. It's like musical genius. And in terms of like another composer, I'm gonna go again with Yoko Shimomura, the longtime composer of Kingdom Hearts, and funnily enough, the Mario and Luigi series, something I only learned about like a year ago. And she has this style, which it's her when you hear it. It's like it's hard to describe, but when you hear her style, it's like embedded in your head forever. And I can speak of enough. While Kingdom Hearts is a mess of a series in terms of story and gameplay and story, one thing that can't be denied is the music always comes out pretty much on top all the time. And her work is just I'm at a loss for words at that point. And she has actually also done remixes for Smash, especially the cast theme remix. Really good, by the way. But yeah, all of them are amazing at their craft, and I hope they keep doing what they do and get more gigs, because that shit needs to be heard, man. All right, and that's good for me.
Mine's this very short, sweet, simple, and to the point. Mick Gordon. That's it. like I think he embodies like the Doom soundtracks currently for what he did with Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. I just can't see him now not working on a Doom game and having those like fucking kick-ass soundtracks, like, rip and tear going on in the background while you're shoving like a demon's arm up someone's ass. I think you need Mick Gordon at that rate to do like soundtracks, and I think he also really did a good job with Killer Instinct, which is really not pointed out often, that he did like a lot of work there, but I really enjoyed the soundtrack for Killer Instinct and the collab he had with the artist there. It was really interesting. So who is next for this favorite composer? Daybreaker?
Sure. Obviously, Daisuke Ishiwatari, who is the creator and composer for the Guilty Gear soundtracks and the games. Very awesome stuff. He's done. I actually just started playing Hardcore Uprising, and he did the soundtrack for it. And it's kind of crazy because the game also has a very similar aesthetic style to what Guilty Gear Xrd became. So it's really, really cool, and that just blew me away. And there's actually a little secret track that you can play during the first stage of the original Contra music. It's the first stage from the original Contra game, and if you do the Konami code, you can actually hear like a redone version by him for the original Contra song stage. So I thought that was super cool. And then the only other one that I have to mention, because a lot of the soundtracks I'm looking at, because I was kind of researching are done by several different people. But one name is Michiru Yamane. I am so sorry if I butchered that, but she was a composer for a lot of the Castlevania games. She composed the Castlevania Symphony of the Night soundtrack, and then later did several of the handheld titles, as well as Lament of Innocence soundtrack, which is probably an honorable mention for me. That's a really stellar soundtrack, regardless of whether or not how you feel about the game. Soundtrack really good. So yeah, definitely shout outs to her.
Andre?
Let me think. I'll go by quick because there's actually I think 2 or 3 right now. One is Harry Gregson Williams. He did Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and 4 soundtrack. This dude is awesome. He's really good. Like he's actually funny enough, he did the music for Shrek. Like he actually composed for the first Shrek movie. Yep.
Wow.
I'm not even kidding you, dude. But Harry Gregson Williams is really good. He's pretty underrated. I really like his music. Like I do love the soundtrack for the Metal Gear games. They're all great. Another one is probably Keiichi Okabe, who did Nier Automata soundtrack. A lot of his music is just downright beautiful, and what makes it even better is Emmy Evans does such a great job with singing the lyrics for the song. It's really good, and I think that's about it on my end. But yeah.
All right, so we're going to did everyone else go? Am I forgetting anyone?
I think so.
Okay, so we're gonna do the final 2 topics. A pretty easy one for this one is favorite boss themes. Who wants to go first?
I'll go if anyone else is okay with it.
Go ahead.
Sure.
One of my favorite boss theme would have to be the in Street Fighter Alpha 2 or Alpha 3. I think it was in both of them, where it's the big field where it's Ryu versus Sagat. That song got me. I'd say another final boss music, or a boss theme in general I liked was the boss theme in Final Fantasy VII. I love tracks that do that, and of course
that was Airbuster, right?
Yeah, it was It was pretty much most of the bosses really, but Airbuster had that song. At least in the original. I don't know what it is in the remake now.
It's pretty much the same, just recomposed.
It's the same.
All right, and the one I cannot forget about, obviously, is Lu Bu's theme in Dynasty Warriors, specifically 4. Like, when you hear that music, run. Do not pursue, # do not pursue Lu Bu.
Run away! Run away!
I think for me, it just goes without saying. I'm going to cite one particular track. I really, really freaking loved all of the boss themes from Virgil from DMC 3. I thought they were... I just liked how it really resonated to the mood each and every single time. And it got more intense as you went on. And each soundtrack sounded like really just... I think the final one for Virgil 3 just sounded really like orchestral, and you knew that this was going to be like the final fight, the end. So they pulled out all the stops to make it sound as epic as they possibly could. And that really, I think that really just seals the deal. It's like either you're going to be killed or the final boss is, and once you create those moments, that's when they're everlasting, in my opinion. So who wants to go next?
I'll volunteer as tribute.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, boss themes. That's always a tricky topic to talk about, but I will once again cite Final Fantasy, and that's still tough, so I'm just going to say 6's boss theme is... I love the high energy in that. It's just that when you hear it, you know you're ready for a fucking fight, and in some cases ready to suplex a goddamn train.
I knew that was coming.
Well, I love finishing off the train with the suplex.
Oh, so great, dude. They need to remake that game. Just do it. Just fucking do it, please.
Missed opportunity in 14 for that. It's like
if they remake it, If they remake it and there's not, and you cannot suplex the train, they're doing it wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whilst on the topic of sexy, I mean, I know this is going all the way to final boss themes, but still, you can't forget Dancing Mad. It's
Yes.
like it's all tiered perfectly, not just from like the climb of Kefka's godly tower in his phases, but also just the final part in general. Again, Dancing Mad indeed, because that motherfucker was crazy. And final, like you already mentioned 7, so I don't need to go that. 9 is, oh my god. While the regular boss theme is great, I have to give my credit to the final battle against Kuja. You know, insert your "We Will Rock You" memes here in the comments. And is out of nowhere as he is, the fight with Necron is always still a good bopping tune. Like you're like, it's just 4 of you, like, you know, fighting for the survival of humanity. Some weird godlike thing. Yes. P.S. How many of JRPGs have done this? A lot. Blooming Villain from Persona 5 is also, oh man, that's a good one. It's like the first time you hear it when you go against the first boss, just like, I'm ready to kick your ass, you son of a bitch. And, well, okay, the entire Kingdom Hearts series, I'm just gonna say that right now. They got a multitude of boss themes in there, but I can't really pick one of them, so I'm just gonna say them all, especially like some of the 3 renditions I like too, because like you remix some of the ones in the first one, and they sound a lot less MIDI because of it, and thank goodness for that, because it gives some already good tunes, but that much needed life. But yeah, like noticing a lot of JRPGs in my repertoire. But I mean, what can I say though? I think we can all agree that JRPGs, like most of the time, really tend to nail boss music. Especially.
They do. You know, it's either it's like stuff like Grandia 1 with the, you know, boss themes, or Final Fantasy 7 for me, or even stuff like Neo. They really, it's just something about those games where they understand that the journey is very prolonged, and they know how to put the music in a very sweet spot. I haven't ran into like a JRPG or RPG in general, action RPG, that has like terrible music placed in a certain area. Not yet, at least. So Andre, I think you're the last one. Did you go?
No, I haven't gone, but I'll go. You know what? It has to be this way from Metal Gear Rising. The final boss in Metal Gear Rising was amazing. Like, I think once I got to Armstrong and heard that theme, and it just kicked in. Holy shit, I was in for a wild ride. Like, I think what's cool about the whole song is it kind of symbolizes like Raiden and Armstrong's ideals, essentially, because, you know, right, they fight for their beliefs, and like the whole song just was perfect. I don't have any issues with it. I think another one is, I think all the Yakuza games have really good final boss music. Like, there wasn't like you know, Yakuza 0, 1, 2, and 3. I haven't played 4 and 5 yet, but all the games have pretty good final boss music from prior. And I guess finally, I would probably want to say maybe Silver Bullet from DMC5. It really does feel kind of out of place, but it's really catchy. I did like it. Though I do kind of wish the duel, you know, Virgil's, when you fight Virgil once, I do wish it was the final boss thing, but Silver Bullet's good. But yeah, that's about it for me.
I think it's almost criminal that we didn't mention MGR until now.
Yeah, right.
No.
Yeah.
I know. I feel kind of tough for that.
I can't believe I was just thinking that too.
That is absolutely criminal.
Yeah.
Oh, Metal Gear Rising had such a great soundtrack, man.
I was like, no one was bringing it up, so I was like, you know what, maybe I'll bring it up.
It's better now than never, as they say.
Yeah, what was Sam's theme called again? Only thing I know for real?
Yeah,
Only
the only
thing
thing
I've ever known.
Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that one's oh my god.
But I
Can't
think
get enough of that shit.
I think we're going to close it out with the final question, which is why is music?
Go on the last one.
Oh, sorry, Daybreaker, my bad.
Oh yeah, damn.
It's
You go.
It's totally fine. But I have quite a bit because there are just so many good boss themes. Brett mentioned Devil May Cry. I love the Neo Angelo boss themes, especially when you fight him for the third time in Devil May Cry 1. I love that theme to death. The all of the Shadow of the Colossus boss themes are super good because it's super awesome too, because those are like progressive soundtracks. So it's like you have this like, you know, immense boss theme when you first fight the Colossus, but then like, you know, when you start climbing the Colossus, the theme changes and it like hypes you up. It's like, oh yeah, you're actually, you know, fighting this thing. So those are really good. The final boss theme in Rengoku Tower of Purgatory has to be probably one of my favorite boss themes. The Code Vein boss themes are really good. There wasn't a boss theme in that I didn't really care for. Really solid stuff. I really like the direction they went with that soundtrack in particular. The Super Metroid boss themes are really good. Like I love the Ridley boss theme. It's been remixed and redone to death, like in modern, you know, video games, especially in the Smash series, have like, you know, guitar metal versions of that track. So that's really cool. God, there was one I just had on the top of my head and I can't remember it. But the last one, the last couple I'll say is Gwen, Lord of Cinder, in Dark Souls 1, a freaking phenomenal boss theme. It's so fitting, and probably if I would say it's probably the best track in that game in Dark Souls 1. Some people may beg to differ. I mean, not that any of the other boss themes are necessarily bad, but it's just that one particular really just captivates me because it's so different from the other ones, because there's no vocals and it's just piano, and it's really, really great. And moving forward from that, the final boss theme, the Soul of Cinder in Dark Souls 3, is a absolutely phenomenal boss theme. It just works so well for that final boss. It's really, really great.
All right, so the final question that we have here is, why is video game music important? I'm sorry. Why is video game music important to you in general? Like, what makes it stand out to you the most when you hear these things in a video game and you have these emotions?
I mean, when it comes to music and games, it just helps to set the mood of a scene or a particular moment.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the general, like, sort of response. Like, just depending on what's going on, you know, whether it brings out emotion, drama, whether it shows, like, what a character is going through at the time. Because, you know, we project ourselves onto these characters and they show a wide range of emotions with their trials and tribulations. I think the music that conveys that, it makes it important to the avatar, to the player, to understand what's going on. And I really appreciate and I enjoy that a lot. I just don't like it when it's like they try to do these little sort of tactics where it's like there's no music to set a scene, but sometimes that could be also good, like to set in the shock and devastation of a character dying. So
it just all depends on placement.
Yeah, it all depends on placement. You also can put like a soundtrack in a certain place and it sounds off, and that has happened in many games before, where they rearranged pieces and they decided to add music in where it shouldn't be. So it all depends on how it's executed, and am I really caring about what's going on in the scene, and the music will supplement and convey that a lot.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important with video game soundtracks is it really adds a lot of charm and personality to the game. Like that's the thing I like. It really adds to like not only just maybe like the world and just maybe the characters, but also like the story in general. You know, because it really has like that feeling to it that really like resonates with you.
Yep, like what everyone else has been saying, music's gotta put you in the mood for whatever's going on in the game. Like if you're doing a Like if you're doing a big, battle, like a big battlefield, get some like, fast metal guitars and shit like that. If you got an emotional scene, atmospheric foreboding music, if you're doing like a horror game or an emotional game like BioShock or something.
Yeah. And like, I know like for example, like fighting games usually have like a lot of the characters usually have their own themes, or if not, they just have like this really stuff that gets your adrenaline pumping, or they have like a lot of different variety of tracks, like either rock or orchestrated music. Like either say like the Guilty Gear games, or I know Street Fighter and Tekken did have a lot of like rock and orchestrated music, and I think they even have a little bit of rap there and there. But yeah.
It's like imagine some moments in games without music, and just see how much of its impact dies because of it.
Yeah, a game would be really boring. Like, there are some games that do ambience well, but at the same time, it's like, I played games with not a lot of music, like during really quieter moments, but it's not the worst thing, because usually the music in that game ends up being really good, like when you actually get into like, a battle or something like that, which I'm fine with personally.
I can definitely tell you that it did not work for Resident Evil 2 Remake. Yeah, the ambience was great, but I kind of just missed the classic themes that played in the game, which is why I turned on the classic soundtrack. It's a few standout pieces here or there, but overall it did not work for what it was going for. And I'm pretty sure some people might like it, but I was not personally a fan, so I'm like classic soundtrack all the way.
Yeah, RE3's music is a little lacking at times too, because I didn't really hear much of it, to be honest with you.
I'll give them some credit. There are recomposed themes for RE3, and at least you can actually hear music in that game as opposed to RE2. But yeah, overall, I would say the classic OSTs for 3 and 2 were really standout.
I definitely think for me, what really helps is that if the music definitely fits the tone, I think that's a super important. And I know we kind of already touched on this, but like, for example, like you wouldn't want a horror game like Silent Hill 2, for example, like you wouldn't want that having like upbeat poppy sort of tones and instruments in its music. That can work in the instance of like the credits music. That's fine. It has guitar prominently featured in the ending themes, but you really want to make sure that the music that you go for is compatible, if you will, with what you're trying to convey. If the game's like at its core, it's like a horror game, you're not going to want upbeat or any sort of like poppy music. You're going to want like more dark tones, maybe a darker metal sort of thing, so you're definitely going to want music of that nature. But if it's a game like an action adventure game, you're going to want guitars and upbeat music that gets the blood flowing and things like that. In certain instances too, we did briefly touch on Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but the way that they redid the Genova track in the game is really, really good. It works really well. At first I wasn't really digging it, but it has like a sort of like shift in the way that the music is presented as the fight goes on. So it definitely is. It definitely captured it a lot better in that aspect. So that is definitely something I would say that I look for in games, is that the soundtrack complements the game very well.
Indeed. Oh yeah. Like from what I played Red Dead 2, there isn't too much music, but from what there is music, it's really damn good. Like it really fits the mood.
Yeah, I think the more you play and the more you experience it, the more you'll probably like where the music is put in certain scenes. But
Oh, yeah, definitely.
yeah, but we're gonna sign out because I'm getting like kind of hungry. So we're gonna do.
I'm hungry too.
Yeah, getting kind of hungry.
Great minds think alike, I guess.
Yep. So we're gonna start off with Andre. Where can we find you?
You can find me at Twitter at Andre B Venom, and it was a lot of fun being on this podcast. Sorry about what happened, what was going on, but hey, I had fun.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's all about the fun that matters. We have tech issues all the time. Daybreaker, where can we find you?
You guys could find me on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter under Daybreaker Rain. I actually am trying to get back into the swing of streaming. I'm a night owl though, so I stream late. So if you're a night owl like me, come on by. I'd love to have you. Also, it was a lot of fun having this podcast. I completely forgot that we were doing it, but I'm glad that we were able to get a couple people together to do it.
Yeah, it's better. Like I said, it's better late than never. And honestly, I thought this went like super well, even though I was like, "There's no doc, so what are we gonna do?" I was kind of freaking out, but we managed to pull through in the end, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, at least we had fun. That's all that matters.
Yep. Yeah. Next up is Inferno. Where can we find you, buddy?
Find me on YouTube and Twitch at Inferno Dragon 343 and on Twitter at Inferno Dragon 3D.
All right, and next up is obviously Mr. JoJo.
You can find me on Twitter at The Lost JoJo, all one word, and you can find me on YouTube the channel JoJo's Woodshed. I plan to stream at least once a week. In fact, I think tomorrow I might be streaming some Dynasty Warriors 8, so come by if you want to see me mash up armies of bad guys with rock and metal music.
Alrighty, awesome. And for me, you guys already know what it is. You can find me at YouTube at Renegade Operative. You can find me on Twitter at RenOperative_. I will be trying to get this podcast up as soon as possible, also along with our reaction to MK Scorpion's Revenge, because I'm sitting on the back burner with that, and our Darkstalkers 3 sort of like tourney for fun. So look forward to that coming to the channel very, very soon. And obviously I will be trying to work on the Haunting Ground First Impressions. I got to play that, see how it is, and I'll give my opinion from there. So it was fun talking to all you guys, and obviously if you are watching this on YouTube, hopefully you like it. We are signing out as the IAS. Hopefully you guys take care, be safe out there. COVID is crazy. And
wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Wear a mask.
Stay safe. Stay inside. Stay indoors.
Watch out for wasps.
Yeah, watch out for big bees.
Watch out for the murder hornets. Yep.
They are invading the West Coast right now, so be careful out there. Anyway, we will see you guys later. Take care.
Later, guys.
Bye.